There's something already well known called the Homestead principle. You can look it up and find articles about it. Basically, saying that whoever works the land gains the right to own it. So, in the context of like the history of the United States, there was like even Homestead Acts, the pioneer days where, if you're the first one out there to claim the land, okay, that's your homestead. Yes, I know there were like 3 million Native Americans already on the continent. I'm not saying it's okay to, like destroy a town or kill people and then take the land they were living on. You know, I don't know what's wrong with people concerning the homestead principle. It's really bizarre. Like, it's such an obvious solution to so many problems, yet people go on these ridiculous tangents, all these logical fallacies, like the straw man, like, oh, you're condoning genocide, so you think it's okay that people are, that people were killed, and as if like everyone who's ever emigrated or traveled from one part of the earth to another part of the earth looking for a place to live was like a genocidal maniac. It's just ridiculous. So that's one absurd tangent that people go off on. And secondly, sometimes people will just talk about the homestead principle like, well, it only applies if the land wasn't previously owned. So this seems kind of more legitimate, but it doesn't make sense historically or currently. Like historically, you have feudalism, right? Like these landlords that like basically enslaved people because they caught, people need land to live on and to grow food and survive, and they owned all the land, and you're under the thumb of the feudal lord. And serfs, right? Serfs, serfdom, you know, being working the land, but having your labor taken from you, and you're just basically a slave on someone else's land, right? You might be working the land, but you're not really free because you don't have your own homestead. So, and currently now in the news, there's news of like China buying a lot of farmland, and apparently now Bill Gates is the number one. He owns the most farmland out of anybody. He's just bought up huge amounts of it. So, if China or some super rich billionaire buys all the land, does that mean then you don't have a right to the land? Oh, well, they bought it fair and square. This is stupid because land, water, and seed are not just like any old commodity. It's not like we're talking about, collectible cars or something, or even gold or silver. We're talking about what a human being needs to survive on the planet Earth. These are survival natural resources, right? Which were not created by any person. If you believe in the creator, obviously you would believe that the creator is the rightful owner, you know, because he created it. But even if you don't believe in the creator, you'd still have to agree that humans didn't create the earth, didn't create the land, didn't create water, right? Didn't create the plant life pre-existing here, right? So that being the case, and also the fact that we need it to survive, right? Like food, clothing, shelter. And not only do we need it to survive, but you need it for privacy and you need it for freedom, makes these particular resources, namely again land, water, and seed, of an exceptional sort, sort that should be recognized as a birthright. I don't know why this is so hard for people to understand. I've been saying this for years, and like zero people acknowledge the plain fact of it. They just go off on a myriad of tangents on all these supposed solutions that just avoid the obvious solution that would reduce poverty, reduce oppression, reduce exploitation, reduce environmental damage across the board. Just all the major problems in the world would be most greatly reduced if people had their own sovereign homesteads where they weren't forced to fund institutions that, you know, historically and currently are causing a lot of problems, to put it simply, right? Why is this so hard to understand that land, water, and seed should be considered a birthright? Why, oh, why? I just, it's like humanity is under a spell and they just can't think the thought. They can't say the words. I find the same thing with pointing out that preemptive attack is illegitimate. Preemptive attack being the idea that you can initiate violence if you say it's for safety, or if you say it's to prevent a possible bad outcome. That's not legitimate. But yet that's really the root of like all tyranny, of all of this oppression. It's just one form of preemptive attack after another, as I've pointed out in many talks prior. And yet I hear zero people calling out preemptive attack, just like I hear zero people pointing out that, hey, homesteading land and water should be a birthright. Nobody. Everyone's talking about all these other things that aren't the real solution. Or if they are talking about, we need to get back to the land, they propose it in a way that isn't applicable or, relevant to most people on Earth, because they can't afford to do what they're saying to do. You know how many people would have their own gardens if they had the land and time to do so? They don't have the option, right? They most live in cities now, first of all, right? Because they've slowly been pushed out basically of rural areas because it's been made economically impossible to survive there. Lack of work, which you need to pay the property taxes, it's just ridiculous. And the reason why I find it so ridiculous is because if you just thought about things on a small scale, it's just super obvious. I've given the example before, I'll give it again. Like if you're on a cruise ship or whatever, you're on a boat with a bunch of people, you land on this uninhabited island, right? But there's some fresh water there, there's maybe some coconut trees, right? What would you do? What would be the sane thing to do? Well, it would be to say, okay, let's make sure everyone has access to the food and the water, right? Let's make sure everyone has some space. It wouldn't make sense for one guy to be like, well, you know what? I want 90% of this island, and like the rest of you have to form like a little mini city, in the corner over there. And I'm also going to take 90% of the food and 90% of the water, and you have to work for me if you want to have access to any of it, right? They'd be like, you're crazy. That's like, you're acting like some tyrant, That's not what we're going to do. We're going to share the food, water, and shelter, and like give each other some space, It's just common basic decency, right? And yet, even though I think most people on the planet, if they encountered that scenario, that's how they would respond, basically. That's exactly what the homestead principle is. It's just taking yourself out of the theater known as, politics and so-called civilization, and realizing it's really the same scenario. We're here on Earth, we're a bunch of humans here on Earth, and we need food, we need water and we need land for survival and privacy and freedom and independence. So why on earth would you think that ignoring that fact and going off on these just really dumb tangents? I mean, every objection I've heard is just complete nonsense. Like I've said, they'll say, "Oh well, all the land is stolen," or again, like not recognizing, like, well, it belongs to everyone. They just come with one straw man after another. Like, this isn't a promotion of violence; it's the promotion of nonviolence, right? Because if you're having your birthrights taken from you, that's violent, right? It's actually theft. You're being denied free access to what was provided for everybody for free, by God, or if you just want to say nature, whatever. I definitely believe it's God, but either way, again, not created by man. Why wouldn't that be the baseline for society? Like, why is this overlooked? It's just insane. Like, it's like collective psychosis. And every time I bring it up to people, they just disregard. Like, I don't know how to explain it other than it's like it goes in one ear and out the other. They don't listen, or they just say some nonsense that's clearly nonsense, and yet then they'll complain about all the injustice and lack of privacy, and go on about food deserts in the city where folks don't have to healthy food. Well, guess what would solve all of those problems? If everyone had like a couple acres of land that they didn't have to pay rent to live on, or they didn't have to pay a mortgage to live on, they didn't have to pay property taxes to live on, and if they had the water to drink for themselves and to grow the vegetables and fruits and nut trees. Why is this so hard to grasp? I don't get it. Again, I've written about this for years and I've gone into detail. Crickets, nothing. So yeah, so now we're all going to be under like feudal communism with Bill Gates and China controlling the food. I mean, this is just so basic. Like, how can you not see this coming? It's like, if you control what people need to survive, well, then you control the people, right? This is like so basic. And it's been going on for centuries and centuries. Like, all these people talking about poverty. Well, what would be the greatest help for the poor? It would be giving them access to land and water and seed so that they could be more self-sufficient, right? And form communities of homesteads, voluntary communities, where they could even be more secure by helping each other out, which is what actually naturally happens in like homesteads, communities of homesteads where everyone has their own garden and orchard, sharing vegetables and fruits and, the produce is just natural. You don't even have to you don't have to make a law or whatever. It's just the natural inclination, and it's just part of the awesomeness of nature, the way it's designed, that you often get such an abundance. It's more than one household could even eat. So naturally you'd want to share it or trade it with the neighbor who has some other fruit or vegetable that you don't have. And right, this is just basic common sense, like reality. I don't know what's wrong with people. I don't know why this is continually ignored. I mean, I know it's shadow banned, but even when I do get to communicate it directly to someone, it still seems like it falls on deaf ears. So I'll just say it one more time. The real solution is voluntary communities of sovereign veganic homesteads. That's it. That's the solution to economic problems. That's a solution to environmental problems. That's a solution to politics altogether, right? Because there's no extortion going on. And then, well, how do they protect themselves? Well, you can have weapons to use to protect yourself and your family, and you can have voluntary militias in your communities to get together and protect the community as a whole. Again, not rocket science. It's like, why do you think overlooking this root injustice and this root solution over and over and over again is somehow wiser? It's just amazing to me in a like frustrating and kind of I don't know what the vocabulary is right now, but anyway, hopefully maybe this will click for somebody this time around. All right, thanks for listening.